Imagine you're a German panzer commander in France, 1944. Your Tiger tank is superior in every measurable way. Thicker armor, more powerful gun, better optics. You've destroyed 3 enemy Shermans already today. But then something impossible happens. 5 more Shermans appear from different directions, moving in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They're flanking, retreating, and advancing in a deadly dance you can't predict. Your radio crackles, but only to call your platoon leader, whose tank is already burning. The Americans? They're talking to everyone, every single tank, every infantry squad, even the planes above. You don't just face 5 tanks. You face an entire interconnected war machine. And by the time you realize this, it's already too late. This is the story of World War II's most underestimated weapon, a technology so simple, yet so revolutionary, that it turned America's inferior Sherman tank into one of the war's most effective fighting vehicles. When historians discuss tank battles of World War II, they obsess over armor thickness, gun caliber, and engine horsepower. The German Tiger tank becomes legendary. The Panther is feared, and the American M4 Sherman? It's dismissed as a Ronson lighter, a death trap that could only win through sheer numbers. But this narrative misses something crucial. Something the Germans never fully understood until it was too late. War isn't won by individual machines. It's won by systems, and the Americans had built the most sophisticated battlefield communication system the world had ever seen, starting with a device inside every single Sherman tank that most soldiers took for granted, the SCR 508 radio. To understand this advantage, we need to go back to the 1930s, when the U.S. Army Signal Corps made a decision that would change warfare forever. While other nations equipped only command vehicles with radios, the Americans asked a radical question. What if every tank could talk to every other tank? By 1942, this vision became reality. The SCR 508 radio set became standard equipment in virtually every Sherman tank rolling off American production lines. This wasn't just a radio. It was a crystal-controlled, frequency-modulated communication system that could operate on multiple channels, had a range of 10 to 20 miles depending on terrain, and was remarkably resistant to interference. Compare this to the German approach. A typical German panzer platoon of 5 tanks might have radios in only 2 vehicles. The platoon leader's tank and perhaps one other. The remaining 3 tanks, they followed visual signals, flags, hand gestures, tracer rounds pointing directions. If the command tank was destroyed, the entire platoon could become deaf and mute in seconds. The Americans. Every tank in a 5-tank platoon could communicate. Tank commanders could coordinate tactics on the fly. They could warn each other about threats. They could call for artillery support directly. They could even communicate with infantry squads and forward air controllers. This wasn't just an advantage. It was a completely different way of fighting. Let me tell you about a day in the Normandy hedgerows, July 1944. No famous battle. No place you'd find in history books. Just a nameless crossroads where the difference between radios and no radios meant everything. A company of 15 Sherman tanks from the 2nd Armored Division encountered a German defensive position. Intelligence reports suggested 3 Panzer IVs and an 80mm anti-tank gun protected by infantry. On paper, a tough fight. In reality, it was over before the Germans understood what hit them. The American company commander, sitting in his tank a quarter-mile back, could see the entire battlefield through reports flowing from his platoon leaders. He didn't need to be in front. His radio meant he could be everywhere at once. Charlie 3. This is Charlie 6. I've got eyes on the 88. Grid coordinates following. Within 90 seconds, American artillery, coordinated through that same radio network, dropped smoke rounds on the German gun position. The German crew couldn't see, couldn't aim. They were combat ineffective without a single tank being exposed. Meanwhile, one Sherman platoon fixed the German armor's attention from the front, while another platoon, guided by radio, swept through a gap in the hedgerows 300 yards to the left. The German panzers never saw them coming. By the time they realized they were being flanked, 2 were already burning. The 3rd panzer tried to retreat, but its commander couldn't effectively coordinate with his supporting infantry because most of his platoon had no radios. The infantry thought they were supposed to hold. The tank thought they were supposed to withdraw. The result? Both got chewed up by American combined arms. Total American losses. One Sherman damaged, back in action the next day. This happened dozens of times every day across every front where Americans fought. Not because of superior armor, not because of bigger guns, because of radios. German after-action reports from 1944 and 1945 reveal a growing frustration. Tank aces who dominated the Eastern Front found themselves confused by American tactics. The Shermans seemed to think collectively. They adapted impossibly fast to changing circumstances. They called in artillery and air support with uncanny precision. Some German commanders suspected the Americans had developed new tactics or superior training. Others thought it was just overwhelming numbers. Very few realized the real secret: information dominance. A captured German tank commander, interrogated in late 1944, expressed his confusion. "Your tanks are not as good as ours, yet you fight as if you can see the entire battlefield. How?" the interrogator's report noted. Prisoners seemed genuinely surprised when informed that all American tanks are radio-equipped. Stated this would be impossible to afford for German production. That last part is crucial. The Germans could have equipped every tank with radios. They had the technology, but they made a calculated decision that radios were expensive, used valuable resources, and weren't necessary for regular tanks whose job was simply to follow their leader. This wasn't stupidity. It was a different philosophy of warfare, one that emphasized individual technical superiority over networked coordination. In 1940, when German tanks faced poorly coordinated French and British forces, this philosophy worked brilliantly. By 1944, facing an enemy that had turned the battlefield into an information network, it became a fatal weakness. The Sherman's radio advantage extended far beyond tank platoons talking to each other. The same radio sets could communicate with infantry units. Tank infantry coordination became seamless. Infantry could call tanks forward for support or warn them about anti-tank positions. Artillery batteries. Forward observers in tanks could adjust artillery fire in real time, turning every Sherman into a potential fire direction center. Air support. As the war progressed, American tank commanders could directly contact fighter bombers overhead, marking targets with colored smoke and coordinating close air support. Higher headquarters, company and battalion commanders could maintain contact with their entire force, adjusting plans as the tactical situation evolved. This created what modern military theorists call networked warfare, a concept that wouldn't be formally recognized until the 1990s, but was being practiced on the battlefields of Europe in 1944. There's an ironic footnote to this story. The Sherman's radio advantage came with an unexpected cost that American tankers paid without ever knowing it. German intelligence units monitoring. Allied radio traffic could sometimes locate American tank formations by their transmissions. The Germans couldn't break the encryption or necessarily understand the content, but they knew something was there, transmitting constantly. Radios made American tanks more vulnerable to being found. But here's the thing. It didn't matter. The tactical advantages of constant communication so completely outweighed the risk of radio detection that it was never a serious concern. A German unit might locate an American tank company by its radio transmissions, only to find that company could call in artillery, air support, and reinforcements faster than the Germans could organize an attack. Today, the idea that every combat vehicle would have sophisticated communications equipment is so obvious, it seems absurd to mention. Modern tanks have data links, satellite communications, and computer networks that make the SCR-508 look like a tin can with string. But in World War II, this wasn't obvious at all. It was revolutionary, and the Americans understood something their enemies didn't. That information, coordination, and communication could matter more than armor thickness or gun caliber. The Sherman tank wasn't the best tank of World War II by traditional metrics, but when you gave it the ability to coordinate with every other element on the battlefield, it became something more effective than the sum of its parts. It became a node in a network, a piece of a system, and that system won the war. The German troops facing those Shermans never fully understood why they kept losing to inferior tanks. They were fighting the wrong war, one tank against another, Gun against armor, individual skill against individual skill. The Americans were fighting a different war entirely. One where victory came not from having the best tank, but from having every tank connected, coordinated, and working as a single, unstoppable force. And by the time the Germans realized this, the war was already over.